Now that you have a good understanding of designing with figure and ground, positive, negative shape, let's get into the studio project. So this studio project does involve positive, negative shape. So as just a super quick review, there's some positive shape right there. As soon as we put a box around our positive shape, which is what I want you to do with this assignment, we establish a format. Here's an example of a piece of art with one positive shape. That's the figure, the woman. All the space around her is the negative shape. But with this particular assignment that we're going to work on now, you're going to be using 3 or 5 positive shapes. So you're going to be using more than one positive shape. So we know that when that happens, what we have to do is that we have to group the positive shape. So I've moved the gray shape behind the black shape. And then if I was to add more shapes, 2 more shapes, I would want to put them really, really close or have them actually touching, even better. Here's an example where we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe you can even say 7 people, and they're all really, really close or grouped together to make a figure. And here I like this example even better because the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people are indeed touching or super close to touching, like in the center there or off center. Those 2 figures are almost touching, but not quite. So pardon the pun, those 2 figures, but when we talk about figure in terms of figure ground, what we mean is the union of all of the positive shapes. So in this case, we have the 5 positive shapes grouped to create one overall figure. And then I just love the way the artist broke up the negative shape in this painting with all the different colors and values. So remember that this up here where I'm waving the mouse, that's all one big piece of negative shape. But this artist didn't want to leave it all the same. That would be too monotonous, too boring. And so this artist has created a lot of visual complexity by breaking up this big piece of negative shape with line and different values and different colors. Beautiful. Okay, so here's your assignment. Step 1, you're going to pick an animal. So I didn't really say that, but maybe that's the true step 1, to pick an animal. And you're going to draw 3 or 5 of the same animal. So now in order to do that, what you have to do is find reference photos, and they should all be of the same animal, but and I mean like the same species, or say the same breed. Like if it's dogs, the same breed maybe. Although I guess if it's dogs, you could use different breeds of the same dog. So yeah. But anyway, the point is that it's not literally the same animal, right? It's just the same type of animal, but in different poses. So when I was collecting reference photos for my horses here, I wanted some horses to be like side view, some where I could see their back end. I love that one where it's like its rear end is facing towards us, but its head is turned back and looking at us too. So this one right here. And then I wanted some maybe like front view, like this horse over here is front view, but it's like turned away from us, from the viewer. Okay, so you're going to choose either 3 or 5. Odd numbers always work well. So 3 or 5. And you got to put them in a group because your goal here is to make a figure. So if you have 3 animals, that's 3 positive shapes, but you have to strategically group them to make a figure. Extend at least one animal right off the composition, but I encourage you to think about extending maybe even all of them right off the composition like I did. And that's going to really break up your negative shape nicely. Because this assignment is just as much about design as it is about drawing. In fact, it's maybe more about design. The drawing part will be easy for some of you. It's the design part that's challenging. Where are you going to place these animals? How are you going to group them? How are you going to extend them off the format? So in the second last bullet there, it says to consider different designs, different versions. And so I encourage you to do that. Don't just do one drawing and be settled with it. Try a few. Try and make a whole bunch of little thumbnail sketches. So make rough copies, small and loose. Okay, they don't have to be refined like these. These would be like my good copies. So rough copies can be a lot looser. And so these are just two examples. This is not that you have to do two drawings. You're just doing one, but I'm saying that you should explore many different ideas. Okay, so ultimately I ended up going with this one, actually. Okay, so now this is step 2. So after you have your composition, and so if you're going to do your rough sketches, that's great, but then eventually you're going to need to draw a good copy. And so that's why the last bullet on this slide says to use good paper and to make it big, like 22 by 28 centimeters, which is about 9 by 11 inches. And you could even go bigger than that, but make it nice and big, like even bigger than your sketchbook. So like if you have the ability to get some poster paper, say, then use that instead of your sketchbook paper. Okay, so once you have your composition chosen, you do a good copy on your good copy paper, and you can draw right to the edge of the paper for this project. We're not going to be taping this project to an artboard. I mean, unless you want to, you certainly could. So if you're going to tape your project paper to an artboard, you should tape it first, then do the drawing. Once you're finished drawing your good copy on your project paper, you need to do this step. Plan the values. And you do so by focusing mainly on the super dark values. You can block in some middle values, but focus mainly on the dark ones and try to create equilibrium in your composition. That means that it seems there's a sense of balance. It doesn't feel like one part of the composition is overpowering or more dominant than another part. So the dark values are strategically distributed around the composition to create balance. In the gray box on this slide, it says that you could do this step on a rough and quick reproduction of your composition. So you might want to just do a really rough drawing of your final composition and then plan your values on that, because I do not want you to do a bunch of dark shading on your good copy with pencil, because we're not using pencil for this project. You'll see what we're going to use momentarily. Now, where are you supposed to know where to put those value shapes in? Well, I'm encouraging you to use your reference photos. So there's the reference photo that I used for that horse drawing. It's a really interesting colored horse, isn't it? And so you can see that I mainly just zeroed in on the dark values that are on the underside of the horse. And then I did put a few middle values in too. So use your reference photos to get an idea of where the value shape should be. I love this shadow on this horse, this shape. It's so distinct. And so you can see it here on my drawn version. The next step, which is step 3, is all about the negative shape and its value in relation to the positive shape. So I want to just take a time out from animals here and use these Michael Carson, or this one Michael Carson painting, as an example, because this is a great example. I just want you to notice how this artist strategically decided that this wall would be a darker value than this wall, and that this wall would have a darker value than the woman's skin, or that the woman's skin would have a lighter value than the couch, or that her dress would be a darker value than the couch. And so if you look at the finished product, we can see all those individual shapes, not because they're outlined, but because of value contrast. Here's another example. We can see the woman's leg, not because it has an outline around it, although there are some dark shadows around the perimeter, but it's mainly because it's a darker value than the space, the negative shape around it, which is, I guess, the floor. And the floor stands out from the wall because it's a lighter value. It's not because it's yellow and the wall is green. It's because it's a lighter value. So it's not really about the color. It's more about the value. I think it's interesting that the woman's dress is almost the same value as the wall behind her. Not quite, it's a little bit darker. So that's why sometimes artists do, look really carefully here, artists do use some line, or I love how this artist just hints at an outline. It's not blatant, It's just sort of a broken line. Beautiful to define the contour of her shoulders. Because yeah, he purposely made the value of her dress so close to the value of the wall. Look at how the wall over here on the right side is a different color than the wall on the left side. That's a great example of breaking monotony. So creating visual complexity by painting in some variety. So back to your actual studio project. So here's my example. So you see what I'm doing now is I'm thinking about the value of the negative shape in relation to the value of the positive shape. So in other words, I knew that I wanted this chunk of negative shape on the far right to be a darker value than the horse's leg or than the horse's body here. Or in general, I knew that I wanted the negative shape to be lighter than the positive shape. And point 3 here says to do that. It says don't make any of the negative shape values as dark as the dark value tones or values on the animals. So I would suggest you do the same. I would suggest you keep the animals the darkest values, or I should say the dark parts of the animals are the darkest values. So in other words, it's not that my horses don't have any light values on them. They do, but the darkest values on the horses are the darkest values, period. There really are no values in the negative shape that are as dark as the ones on the horses. Another thing you should do in this step is think about how you're going to break up the large chunks of negative shape into sub-shapes. So like, for instance, this is a big piece of negative shape here. All of this, actually. And so the artist breaks it up into like wall ground or wall floor by using 2 different values. And so I've broken up my negative shape all over the place by having changes in value. Or look, I even incorporated a shadow, which is just a shape, right? And I'm making the shadow obvious by using darker values. So do that too. Plan the negative shape and how it will be designed. Make sub-shapes. You don't have to create a setting, but you can hint at one if you want. So I'm sort of hinting at a pasture setting, but I'm trying to keep it vague. Step 4, choose 2 complementary colors. This is another painting by the Michael Carson, who's the artist of the other 2 human paintings that I showed you. We're going to steal this idea. We're going to use 2 colors only for the artwork. 2 colors mainly, I should say. And they're going to be complementary colors. Complementary colors are colors right across from each other on the color wheel. So in this case, the complementary colors are I need to adjust the color wheel there. Red and green. Okay. Sorry. There we go. Red and green, complementary colors. 2 colors right across from each other on the color wheel. Now you can use tertiary colors too. So for instance, yellow green would be right here, and its complementary color is boom, red violet. Okay, so you can use tertiary complementary colors also. Now, another thing that I want to encourage you to do is add a really unique quality to your artwork by desaturating your colors. Change the intensity of the colors. Earlier, you learned about the 3 properties of color, and you know that intensity is one of the properties of color. Intensity has to do with the purity of a color. So you can change the purity of a color by mixing another color into it. And so when we work with complementary colors, it works really well because that's one of the best ways to desaturate a color, to mix in its complement. So in other words, in this painting, it's likely that Michael Carson mixed some red into his green before he used this green. And that's how he made it that really low intensity, almost like an olive green color. Another way to lower a color's intensity is to add white to it, or you could add gray, or you could add colors that already have low intensity, like tans and browns, like earthy colors. So if you mix small bits of those colors into your main colors, you'll lower the intensity of your main colors. Step 5, choose a medium. I thought it would be fun to use a drawing medium with this project instead of paint. So I'm going to give you the option of using colored pencil or marker. But with marker, you've got fresh marker or maybe old faded marker. Or if you look at the center example, I've actually used a combination of fresh and faded markers. I really love using faded markers because I find with faded markers, you can control values better because they almost act like colored pencils where the harder you press with them, the darker the mark will be. And so the 3 examples you see here are all done with those particular forms of media. Now, another distinction I'd like to make between the 2 marker pieces is that I kind of call the one in the center like a comic book style, because as you can see in that one, there's quite a bit of black ink. So traditional comic book art is like that, where an artist does the pencil work and then the pencil portion is handed off to an inker, and another artist inks and then colors also the art. And so I've kind of done that with that center example where it's in color, but there's also quite a bit of black ink, giving it kind of a comic book look and feel. In the other marker version, there's black, but it's more like I've used the black to darken or shade the main colors, like I did with the colored pencil. So I used black colored pencil, yes, but mainly to darken my reds and my greens. So by the way, the complementary color scheme that was used for all 3 of these examples is the same one that we saw in this example here, red and green. But if you look really carefully, you can see that I did use some extensions of those colors. Like maybe I used kind of a peachy red, and maybe I used a goldenrod or like a tan because I thought it sort of resembled green, or maybe I blended it in with the green to make it resemble green. So when I say that you should only use 2 colors, that's your main colors, but you can kind of branch off from them as long as you're using colors that are close to those 2 colors, or maybe you mix them into those 2 main colors and then you create harmony in that way. If you look carefully at the center piece, you'll see some blue by the horse's feet right here. I did that because I wanted a little piece of the artwork to really stand out and be different. I wanted to break some of the monotony. I did the same on this example over here with this peach color. So I was careful not to use too much of it. I didn't want it too evenly distributed around the artwork. So this 6th step really is I guess the meat and potatoes of your project. So it involves using your colors to add color. But what the way I like to say it is you're adding the value. You're adding the dark, middle, and light values, but in color, so not in pencil. So what you see on this slide is you see my value plan on the far left, and then you see the finished product in colored pencil. So the finished product wasn't in pencil, it was in colored pencil, but I followed my value plan from my pencil version. And then on the right side of the slide, there's just some notes about color. So like red and green were my main colors. And I also used black to darken the main colors. As you know, with colored pencil, we don't use white. We use the white of the paper. So it's all about density. So wherever I wanted lighter values, I just didn't put as much color down on the paper. Now I decreased green's intensity, it says in that charcoal gray box, by mixing in goldenrod, which is like a yellow orange, and light sienna into it. I also mixed red into it. So in other words, when red and green are mixed, that in turn creates a low intensity version of both those colors. Okay, but I'm saying that I also used goldenrod and light sienna. So there again, you see, it's not that you're just using 2 colors. You can use other colors to desaturate your 2 main colors. And that's what that gold box there says, is that by layering your two main colors, because they're complementary colors, they automatically get desaturated. So when I layered my red and green in this version, they automatically got desaturated because they're complementary colors, so they desaturate one another. But I also used the goldenrod and the light sienna in this marker version. I found markers that were similar to those two color pencil colors. So goldenrod and light sienna are actual colored pencil colors from the Prismacolored brand, but I was able to find faded markers that were close to a yellow orange and one that was a beige. By the way, if you can't, like, what if you don't have a yellow orange marker? Well, then just take a yellow marker, color with it, and then on top, color with some orange. So you can blend lots of markers in order to achieve certain hues that you want, certain tertiary hues. If you don't have a blue-green marker, layer some blue and green together to get that color, to get that hue. Look at all this beautiful texture here on the right side of the artwork. That's why I love, another reason I love faded markers is that when you layer them, you can achieve some very expressive texture. It is a drawing tool, right? Marker is kind of a drawing tool, but in this case, I'm painting with it. But because of the nature of the marker, my colors have a lot of line texture, almost like brush strokes that you can see. So here's that comic book style one. Maybe I didn't layer as many colors in this one. I guess down at the bottom of the composition I did. I want to point out that in this one I used quite a bit of gray. Gray is a great color to use. It's like a freebie. It's neutral. It can go with any color scheme. So sometimes you want to use you're working on a part of your artwork and you don't want to use one of your color scheme colors. You want some variety. And so consider using neutral colors like gray or even like beiges and earthy taupes. Those are great colors. They can go with any color scheme. Now, I've got another resource for you, and you'll find it in Moodle. And they are videos. I actually videoed myself creating these three examples. And so if you're really interested in using colored pencil, I would watch the video of me doing this artwork in colored pencil, because through the video or during the video, I give tips on how to achieve these color layers and how to work with value and how to create some of these textures. And I'm just kind of giving a commentary of the artwork as I'm making it. And that goes for all these. So I have a video for the faded marker. I have a video for the comic book style marker. Like with this one, what did I do first? Did I do the black, or did I lay in the color and then do the black later? So, watch at least part of the video that goes with the medium that you choose. You can kind of fast forward or rewind through the videos, because they are kind of long, because I did actually video the whole process of me making these pieces of art. But definitely check those videos out. They're going to help you. The last thing I want to mention is that, as I said, markers and colored pencils are drawing tools. So feel free to be creative with your use of line. I want you to refrain from outlining your subject matter, because I want you to get used to relying on value contrast to define edges. So like, for instance, if you can see my mouse here, on the back of this horse where the tail is, there's no outline here because I don't need it, because the tail is so much darker than the negative shape beside it. But on the other hand, here is some nice line that's emphasizing this beautiful contour that we see down the horse's body here. If you're going to do that, though, vary your line width. If you look carefully here, this line is thicker, and then it starts to get thinner as it moves down the horse's leg. Or if you look carefully enough, you'll see that sometimes my line disappears and then it comes back. I call that broken line. So be strategic, be creative about your use of, or with your use of line. It's really easy to do that with colored pencil. If you look on the colored pencil version, you can see where I pressed really hard here on this bottom horse's contour along its leg. but then I eased off on the pressure of on the pencil, and that made the line lighter, and then I was able to kind of just fade it away. And we see that again here on this horse's leg. Press harder and then fade the line away. Okay, so be creative with line. Use it to create textures, like I was doing some scribbling in the negative shape of this one. Do some outlining of expressive contours, but just be careful with how much you do. That's it. Have fun with this assignment, and I look forward to seeing your expressive artwork.